The Coonhound Collective podcast is brought to you by CZ Welding and Custom Dog Boxes. Dog boxes built by hunters for hunters. Check these guys out today. This is your host, Jason Snellgrove, and I will be your guide as we journey down the road to pleasure hunt or hitting the long trail to those great comp hunts. This is the Coonhound Collective podcast. Welcome to the Coonhound Collective podcast today. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Young, and he is a veterinarian. Dr. Young, how's it going today?
It's doing good. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. We're getting a little shower here in southwest Missouri, and we definitely need it, and very appreciative of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been dry summer for a little while here in Virginia, and finally got some rain the last few weeks. Always grateful to have it.
Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, kind of what you do, and obviously you're a veterinarian, and kind of tell us where your practice is and stuff like that.
Sure. My name is Dr. Taylor Young, and I am a mixed animal practitioner in Central Virginia. I live in Bedford, work in Bedford County, Virginia, and I see primarily cats, dogs, and then horses and cattle, and a little bit of other large animal stuff out on farms. But that makes up the bulk of my practice. And I've been here at this current practice for a little over a year now. So I really enjoy being out on farms and working farm animals, but hunting dogs are my personal hobby and passion, something I've loved for a long time. And so kind of created this tree dog doc thing to just try to help promote health and welfare and veterinary medicine with our tree dogs. And so that's kind of a little bit of my veterinary background and stuff that I do.
Yeah, and I first heard you on Ben Sheets' Tree Talking Media podcast, and I thought, man, I've got to get this guy on here. And so then I got to searching you on Facebook and Instagram, and I found it. And if anybody's interested in going over and following him and seeing some of the articles he's gotten written, they're really good. It's Tree Dog Doc on Facebook, and I believe it's the same on Instagram. And haven't you wrote some articles in Full Cry or American Cooner, or one of those?
Yeah, they publish in both of those. I've been writing those for about half a year now, and it's the same article in both magazines. But yep, Full Cry and American Cooner.
Okay. I first reached out to you because I had an issue with a dog that I brought into my kennel, and we're going to get to that here shortly. But before we get into that, one of the topics I discussed with you that I'd like to discuss is some of us are rural. Maybe we can or cannot get to a vet pretty quickly. And if we cannot, what are some good things to have on the truck on hand that we could keep with us in case of, snake bite or a dog getting cut or, what have you? Can you kind of go into what a ideal first aid kit for a hound would look like?
Sure. I would say the first thing is, if in doubt, call your vet. And there's things you can get yourself into trouble with, thinking that it's not a big deal. We'll wait and see how it turns out, and you sometimes get yourself in trouble like that. So when in doubt, call your vet. But with that preface, when you're looking at a first aid kit, there's kind of two ways that I do it. You've got your in the vest or you're in the pouch kit to have out in the woods with you. And then you can make a bigger kit to have in your truck. And you'll get a lot of different opinions depending on which vet you ask or which book you read or which online magazine article you read about what you should have in which and what you should carry and not carry. But I'll kind of cover things that I have and then some other things that maybe you need depending on your location and what you run into most often. But in my vest, in my pockets, when I'm actually out in the woods chasing my dog, the most helpful thing I probably have in there is a multi-tool. I carry a Leatherman on me all day, every day, and being able to have a pair of pliers in there to pull out thorns, I guess depending on where you are, porcupine quills or something like that. It's just really helpful having a knife on there. So that's a helpful piece to have. And then the main thing you need to be able to stop while you're actually out in the woods is to stop a bad bleed. And we're talking a bleed that's, that's gushing blood. They cut an artery, they cut something that's bleeding real heavily. I'm not just talking about a cut that's on the skin that's just a little bit bloody, but I'm talking about a major bleed. And basically, to do that in the woods, you're trying to apply pressure. And so having bandage material you can apply pressure with and wrap it on there quickly to be able to stop that is important. So that's stuff like a couple gauze pads, some probably some stretch gauze, and then some vet wrap. And so those couple things right there, you put the gauze on the bleed, you wrap it with some of the stretch gauze, and then finishing it up with vet wrap applied more tightly than you would on a regular bandage will be able to help hold pressure on something that's bleeding until you can get them back to the truck. Past that, maybe some saline if you have some room for it. Saline is just kind of similar to salt water, but it's made, sterile and made for flushing, like something in an eye, or if you had a shallow wound that was really dirty and you were trying to flush it out before you wrapped it, that would be a good thing to have. But past that, that's realistically, there's these big, gun dog kits you can buy, and it's packed all kinds of stuff in it. But that's not really practical to carry out while you're actually walking in the woods with you. But that stuff will get you through most of the stuff that you're going to run into. And really, that's stuff like a bad bleed or, something, a really bad laceration that you just need to wrap and keep clean until you get back to the truck. Once you get back to the truck, you can obviously have a lot more in there. And again, you'll have different opinions on what you need to have and not have, but stuff to better address the wound, to be able to better address a bad cut or a laceration, and then trying to keep things clean and dried out until you can get it better assessed. There would be things that we're looking at in the truck. So more bandage material. You can have those gauze pads and non-adherent pads too. Are really nice for something that's going to be wrapped up a little bit longer. You can easily keep your flush in your truck. And when I'm saying flush, I'm talking saline flush. Don't use, this is a common error. A lot of people use hydrogen peroxide to flush out a wound or something like that. Hydrogen peroxide, come to find out, is actually damaging to cells that we're trying to get in there to heal things. And so putting peroxide in there actually delays wound healing. And so vets have moved away from using peroxide. And instead, it's better to just use just plain saline. You can get that sometimes in your pharmacy. Some versions come in a can, or some of them are like just a saline eye flush. That's usually fine. And then you can add some disinfectants to it. If you go down to the farm store and get some form of iodine, make sure it's labeled for use in wounds and dogs, because there's some stronger versions out there. But iodine or betadine type solutions you can add to that saline, and that gives you some antibacterial properties in there. Novosan or chlorhexidine is the generic solution, not scrub, but use solution. You can add that some disinfectant, any of those things, and really that's for flushing wounds that you can tell are shallow enough, but they're, he ran through the creeks and mud and dirt and got it contaminated with dirt, and you just want to flush it out and see what you're dealing with. So some flush is really good to have, and it's really important too for anything that you're going to bandage. And you'll notice I'm saying bandage and not staple or stitch, and I'll come back to that. But before you wrap dirt into a wound, it's important to try to get it as clean as you can. And some good flush is really helpful to do that. Some things with flushing, if it's too deep where you can't see, especially if it's on the main trunk of the animal, on the chest or on the abdomen, be really careful with flushing. You don't want to add fluids into a space that's not supposed to have it, like into the thorax, into the chest cavity between the lungs and the chest wall, or into the abdomen. But for things like on the leg or the ear, and the hips, the places like that, you're usually okay to flush and try to get some of that dirt out of there as you can. When I said I come back to staples and sutures or stitches, there's a real opportunity there to get yourself in trouble. And I know it's really popular and common to have a stapler in your truck and just go ahead and put the skin edges back together and call it good. But I get to clean up the messes that get made with that. And what can happen is if you're just stitching or suturing over a cut or a wound, and you don't know how deep it is or where it's headed inside that dog's body, what you're doing is you're closing up the ability for air to get to it, and you're closing up bacteria that's in that wound, because just about any wound that's going to happen while you're out hunting is dirty, and you're closing up bacteria in there, and that just allows that stuff to grow and to fester and can really cause a problem. So I would advise against using the stapler or stitches for anything other than just trying to put two pieces of skin together. Maybe you've got a big old flap or a piece of skin that's hanging down, and you're just trying to keep it together and covered while you're on your way to get definitively handled. I think that's okay, and a stapler is good for that. But just use it sparingly and use just enough to oppose those edges. And if you also consider how that staple feels while you're getting in there awake, it doesn't feel good. If you want to try it out on yourself, go ahead and see how it feels to have a stapler put in your skin while you're awake. It's not great. So use them just enough to do what you need, and then get it to a vet where they can properly clean it and assess it under some sedation or anesthesia. So that's kind of wound stuff. Other things that you can handle out and truck them with your kit would be things like areas of swelling or of inflammation, bruising, things like that. They ran over a log and didn't quite make it and knocked their leg, and then you got a spot that's swollen. Something like a good ice pack, one of those packs you can get for your first aid kit for you, where you kind of crush it together and it has a chemical reaction, makes it real cold. That can help a lot with some swelling. You can use a little vet wrap or something to help hold it on there. Don't apply that directly to an area of swelling. You can put a little padding in between the ice pack in there and help hold that on. There's controversy about using steroids and antihistamines like Benadryl for swelling or for insect bites, for example, stings, snake bites. In general, I would not prescribe out a steroid like dexamethasone, because it's really easy to get yourself in trouble again with dexamethasone, and I would not advise giving it in cases of swelling, or especially for snake bites. There's actually a good study out, and I posted that on one of my social media posts that says steroids really don't help with a snake bite. So that's not something I'd reach for. Antihistamines like Benadryl, there's lots of varying opinions even amongst veterinarians on whether that's okay to use and give. I think it's probably okay. Talk with your vet about a dose. You'll see lots of different dose ranges, and they can advise you on what's appropriate for your dog. But for something like an insect sting on the mouth, or they bit a hornet as the yellow jacket nest erupted after they've danced over it, that's probably something that can be helpful and good to have in your truck box. Other things you can handle, let's say you're going on a trip and you're going on a competition hunt out of state or something like that. You're going on a weekend long trip hunting with your buddies. Something to handle some basic GI issues is a good thing to have on hand. And when I'm talking GI issues, I'm talking like diarrhea and vomiting. So stuff to have for diarrhea would be to start with a prebiotic and a probiotic. Those are kind of different things. A prebiotic helps feed the bacteria that's already in your dog's gut. Probiotic is the actual bacteria themselves. And there's a ton of different brand names and a ton of different variations. A popular one that's been used in a lot of hunting dogs is Fortiflora, made by Purina. You can get those in little dry packets and put it on their feed, or you can get it in tablet form. And that's a good thing to start, even if you're about to head out of town and you just need to try to get a heads up because your dog gets traveling diarrhea or stress diarrhea. And that's something you can start before you go. But even if you don't and you're trying to help it while you're out there, that's a good thing to have. There's also lots of different anti-diarrheal meds out there. And there's some that we use, like Propectolin as a paste that's got some stool firmer in there and some probiotics in there, some Indazorb tablets. Your vet may have a different version of these. But that's a good thing to have to help dry up some diarrhea. That can dehydrate a dog pretty quick. And not to mention make a mess in your box, right? So having something to help address that's good to have. For vomiting, there's a really great drug called Serenia, and that's something that I would feel comfortable scripting out to somebody who has a dog that you're going out of town with, or you think might get a little car sick. And that's just an anti-vomiting med, and it can really help for a dog that's having some GI upset, maybe something they ate out in the woods, or having some car sickness. And those are both these things that are easy to have a few tablets in your first aid kit back in your truck box and ready to go. Past that, that's kind of the list of things and how to use them that I keep in my truck. Was there anything else that I missed that you can think of that you have run into in the field or would want to know to have?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I missed was when I was 16, I had a black and tan coonhound got bit on the ear, and I guess it went through a vein in his ear. And I mean, oh my God, it bled. And you never said stick mud in it. That's what I did when I was 16. I got mud off the creek bank and packed his ear with it and got him home, and it wouldn't stop bleeding. And I've always used large animal vets, so I called my large animal vet up and said, "Hey, I got a hound got bit on the ear and it's bleeding. I can't get it to stop." And he said, "I'll bring him over here." And I took him over. He ended up having to put a stitch in it just to get it to stop bleeding. So I missed the mud part there. No,
well, in those bleeding situations, stop when the bleeding is the first thing, and then you can clean up the mud later. So probably wasn't the worst thing you could have done.
Yeah. Well, that's just being a young kid, not knowing. I thought, well, hey, mud will pack around it, so maybe that'll stop it. But it didn't. No, I think that was really, really great information. A lot of those things I keep with me. I do have a Leatherman, but I leave it usually in my deer hunting bag. But now that you've said that, especially thorns out here where I'm at, we have a lot of locust trees, and I've actually had dogs have the thorn go in their pad, their foot, and have to go back to the truck and dig around and find a pair of pliers. So I think I'm going to move that Leatherman so I can have it with me in my comp vet vest all the time there, because I do think that's a good thing to have with you. I hadn't really thought about that. I thought, well, I just need to buy me a small pair of pliers and throw in my vest or something, but I do got a Leatherman down there I will move. So I think all that was good information, and good things to have, and I think people can definitely gain something from that if they don't already have those things in there. Hey guys, this is Jason over at the Coonhound Collective podcast. Is your dog box starting to get wore? Maybe it's starting to get a little cracked like mine is. Maybe you've just been thinking about it's time to upgrade to a new box, but you've asked your buddies and you're just not real sure what direction to go in. Well, let me help you out here. Go check my friends out at CZ Welding and Fabrication, Custom Dog Boxes and Aluminum Products on Facebook. You can check out all their custom work they do there and their designs that they do. If you don't see something that you don't exactly like there, reach out to Nathan at 540-810-5439, 540-810-5439, or send him a message through the Facebook page. I bet he can fix you up. Don't wait till fall to get that new dog box. Go ahead, get that dog box now. Get you something looking good in the back of your truck that you can be proud of and that you can haul your dog around in comfort. Check my friends out at CZ Welding and Fabrication. You won't go wrong. Dog boxes built by hunters, for hunters. Get yours today. CZ Welding and Fabrication. So, before we move into the next thing, I forgot to ask you this at the first so you could tell us about it. And you mentioned your dog a couple of times in there when you're out there hunting. So, tell us about what kind of dog you hunt, because you're a hunter also besides being a vet, and you hunt a tree dog. So tell us a little bit about your dog and what he is and what you're hunting with him.
Sure. Yeah, right now I'm hunting he's just a little over a year old, Ladner blackmouth cur from down in Mississippi. His name is Rip, and he's a hoot. He's my second Ladner dog. I had another growing up, and we hunted squirrels and coons with her. And I got out of it for a little while going to school and then the vet school, and just kind of ran out of time, got married and started a family. And once I got out of vet school, I knew it was going to be another Ladner cur. I just loved my first one so much. And so the Rip is currently getting hunted on squirrels. He's, he had a lot of miles put on him last season, and still didn't end up with him treeing more than just a few by sight. And but he's coming along. We've kept him in the woods this summer as much as I can, and he's starting to get out some good hunt range, and 200, 300 yards. And I think we're pretty close to getting some treeing by scent, and we ought to be rolling once kill season opens back up. And we'll probably switch to some coons in late winter once the leaves get off the trees, and once I get him a little bit better started on squirrel. And I've got quite a few properties that's got some coons around here, and so we're looking forward to switching over to that here soon too.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I shared with you earlier that I had won a Feist dog in a raffle that I'll be getting here at the end of the month, and I'm super excited about that. I've never had a squirrel dog. I've always had coonhounds of some sort. I kind of like black and tans and English, and I've had a little bit of everything except for I think a red bone, but yeah, and boy, it is super exciting when they're right there at that point of that switch getting flipped and really taking off and treeing and doing a good job for you. It's super, super exciting time.
That's right. It sure is.
So the next subject that I kind of brought up to you about was tick-borne illnesses. And one of the things that we kind of talked about, and I kind of wanted you to kind of discuss and talk about was, for example, I given my dog a product like NexGard or something similar to that. They've been on it for a while, but I'm still seeing ticks are biting them, but the ticks are dead that are on them. Are they still susceptible to tick-borne diseases because they're still getting bit by the tick initially? And if so, is there anything we can do to stop that?
Yeah, so ticks and tick-borne disease, we see with increasing frequency. We test for it routinely in our hospital. And, I'd say probably most of you guys, if you're hunting coon dogs, if you're in an area to do so, you're be dealing with ticks. So, to the first question, you're using a pill, but you're still seeing ticks on your dog. Is that okay? Are they still susceptible to disease? And is there anything else you can do for it? So the pills are really the best thing going right now. And that's NexGard, Bravecto, Credelio, Simparica. That's the four big ones. I don't think I'm leaving anybody out. And they all use a drug in the same drug class of the isoxazolines, or there's different ways to say that, but something that ends in laner. And so those drugs all work by, they get absorbed into the dog's bloodstream. They maintain effective levels for 30 days or up to 90 days for the Bravecto pill. And the tick does not die until they actually crawl on the dog and bite and absorb that medication into their bloodstream, and then it kills the tick. And so it is normal to find ticks on your dog if you're on the pill, and to even have them be attached. But at that point, unless you just found one just after hunting, it's just attached, you should find them on there dead. And most of these pills, we use Simparica most often because it's also offered in a combination pill called Simparica Trio that covers heartworms, and some intestinal parasites too. But most of these pills will have a label claim to protect against Lyme disease. I know Simparica for a fact does have that label claim, and I believe the others do as well. But the idea is that the tick needs a certain amount of time attached to the dog in order to take a blood meal and then regurgitate basically back into the dog those bacteria that they're carrying in their gut. And so the pills kill before the disease is supposed to be transmitted. And so, yes, they are still being protected from those tick-borne diseases. However, it's not 100%. For the first time ever, I've had a dog that's been loyal on his flea tick pill every month. He's been on the Simparica Trio, and he tested positive for Ehrlichia. And so no medication is 100% effective. Whether that's the pills, the collars, the topicals, none of it is. So you got to realize that. But if you are faithful with your testing and your pill giving, some of these medications will have a guarantee that basically says that if you can prove that you had a negative test, that you've bought enough of these pills to be given it, and your dog shows up positive for one of these diseases. I know Simparica Trio specifically covers Lyme disease. The company that manufactures the pill will cover for follow-up testing and diagnosis and treatment of that disease. And I think that's a pretty good cover. I think Simparica covers up to $2,500, which is quite a big bill to follow up on if your dog does get positive for Lyme at least. And so, that's a pretty good guarantee in my mind. It helps me feel better about, I trust my own dog's tick prevention with that pill. So that's a pretty good label claim to back up those cases where it does slip through the cracks. But even with the pills, since that's just an oral medication that they're taking in, the nice thing is that for dogs at high risk of exposure, like our dogs being in the woods all the time, you can add stuff to the pill. And so you talk with your vet about which particular pill you're using and which particular topical you're interested in. But some people will combine the oral pill with a Seresto collar, or they'll combine a pill with a topical spray, or with one of the topicals like Vector 3D. And like I say, check with your vet to make sure that the combination you're wanting to use is appropriate. But what that will do is some of these topicals carry not just a tick killing claim, but they carry a repellency claim. Seresto does, I believe Vectra 3D does, I believe Canine Advantix does, that they're labeled for actual repelling. And then there's various sprays out there. People have been mixing permethrin from the farm store in various concentrations for forever. I'd stay careful with that, but there's also plenty of permethrin mixes already pre-made that's already labeled safe for your dog. And I just use one of those personally. I use a spray for my dog, and it's labeled to give no more than every 7 days. And I keep up with that and follow the directions and basically wet his hair down. And that can help keep the ticks from getting on there. And this just adds an extra layer of protection with the pill, so that they're not even getting to where they can bite. But those sprays, topicals, and the collar, unfortunately, none of those are as effective as they used to be. So I absolutely would not rely on them unless your dog can't have the pill for whatever reason, seizures or neurologic issues being one of them. But I would not rely on them for most dogs for tick prevention, but they can be a good adjunct to the oral pills to give you an extra layer of protection there. And I'd advise just talking with your vet about which one of those might be okay to add along with it.
Yeah, for sure. And one more time, can you say the name of that pill that you're using that has the guarantee on it that you know about?
Yeah, it's Simparica that one's just flea tick, and then there's a Simparica Trio that adds two different drugs. That adds moxidectin for heartworm prevention, and then it adds pyrantel for intestinal parasites like roundworms and hookworms. And so I use the Simparica Trio in my dogs, but the Simparica is the flea tick part of that.
Okay. Yeah, that's good information to know. And like I said, I had noticed that before on one of the medications that I was using monthly, and I always thought, well, if they're biting them, then they can still get the whatever, tick-borne illness, and that explains it very well. So that's good information to know. Okay, we're right at 30 minutes, and I don't want to keep you no longer, so I want to move into this other deal that I've talked to you about. That we were texting, and you text me, and you said, I explained my situation, and you said, yeah, I think that'd be a good topic, and you said the word biosecurity, and I thought,
are you tired of whipping, scolding, and shocking to make them get alone? Is your buddy tired of helping you set your dog up for correction night after night? Do you really want your dog to be alone because you forced him to be? Or would you rather him be alone because he wants to be? Grand Night Champion Small Town Lone Survivor is the product of over 25 years of strong natural-born independent traits. This bold trait has been passed down from generation to generation and is showing up in loner offspring today. Loner is a direct son of Hall of Fame Grand Night champion Cabin Creek Rowdy and Grand Night champion Lonesome Dove Lori. Loner has a booming mouth that is talked about in every cast he has been in, including the 2021 World Hunt Finals. Loner is a no-reverse, ball-mouth open trailer who ends it plussed up with a huge dying locate and steady chop. Loner loves getting split and is a stay-put gun-pressure tree dog. Loner's intelligence is also impressive. He knows over 12 voice and hand signal commands. Loner has a character that loves like Jesus, but he doesn't walk on water. If you're interested in breeding to Loner, contact Brett Stevens at Small Town English Kennels at 417-300-3777 or find him on Facebook.
If you're interested in running a stud ad for your dog here on the Coonhound Collective podcast, reach out to us at thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. Send us a message through Facebook or Instagram, and we'll be glad to get with you to get you an ad built and get you pricing on all of our ads. Okay, I'm a redneck, so I'm going to have to look this up and see exactly what he's meaning here. But I'm going to explain the situation that happened with me, or what I think that's happened with me. And then you can kind of explain some steps that we need to take when this happens, or prior to this happening, and to be prepared for. So I had a dog come in on a dog hauler. I brought him in. I have a farrowing house, old hog farrowing house barn here, set up for my dog kennels. You can go over to the YouTube channel and go back, and the videos there. You can see the videos of my dog kennels there. When this dog come in, it never crossed my mind about quarantining or nothing. I didn't even think about it. But I put the dog in a very far pen, and I had a litter of puppies in this dog kennel at the other end. They were just coming off the mom. The puppies were not next to the dog, and my puppies were healthy. They were fine. They were playing, running, no issues whatsoever. And all of a sudden, they come down. One come down kind of looking puny, not looking just right, kind of sickly, and the pup ended up dying. Immediately, I contact my vet. He thought he did not run an actual test or anything, but he looked at them and he examined them, thought they had coccidia. He gave me Albon, said, Jason, if that's it, they'll be running around happy puppies in a couple of days. That was, I think, on a Thursday. He checked back with me on Friday, and then he checked with me on Saturday morning. And then I told him, I said, man, they don't look good. And he said, they're probably dehydrated. You need to get some fluids in them. And me and him got together and got them started on fluids. So anyway, long story short, I ended up losing my whole litter of puppies that I had there. I bought some product from Revival called Kennel Sol. I pulled all my dogs out of the kennel. I followed the label just like it said. I treated walls, floors, pins, wire, because I didn't know what I had. Well, after we talked and you used the word biosecurity, I got to looking it up, and because I couldn't, a buddy of mine, me and him talked, and he said, well, it could have been that, but he's not sickly acting, he's not sickly looking, and so we didn't understand. But there's a thing called biological vector. And I'll let you explain all that stuff, because I'm not very familiar with it. But in that situation, we have a dog coming, like I have, me and you talked, I have a squirrel dog that will be coming at the end of the month. It's just a little puppy. What should we do from the time that dog gets to our place, off the dog hauler, for how long? And if it's a carrier of something, is there anything we can do going forward to protect our other dogs?
Yeah. So, I guess let's define some terms. You brought up the word biosecurity and vector and all those nerdy words I had to learn in vet school. And so biosecurity is kind of the idea of protecting against biological threats, I guess is a good way to think of it. So we're trying to protect against diseases and getting ahead of the game rather than responding to an issue once it arises by various means. And a lot of this I steal from my large animal side of the work, and I'm sure your large animal vet deals with this pretty heavily too. And a lot of times we don't think about it so much with our dogs, but then a situation crops up like you just went through, and you start asking questions, and we realize it's important here too. So what we're really trying to do is prevent the spread and transmission of these diseases, and by using medicine means, we're trying to prevent them from ever sharing them in the first place. And the problem is that there's so many diseases out there and so many things that you could run a test on. And when you test a dog for something, you don't just send in blood to the lab and say, I want to test my dog for diseases. I mean, there's pages and pages of diseases that you have to, as a vet, specifically test for and specifically request. And each one of them costs money. And so, to just go and say, I want to test this dog that's coming into my house to make sure it doesn't have any diseases, it's not really practical. What is more practical is to try to prevent that dog from giving the diseases to your dogs by means of quarantining and disinfection and things like that. So the first thing is vaccinations. Most of the diseases that are going to cause an issue are covered in a vaccine. Things like parvo is still something that's huge. As many years as we've had the parvo vaccine, we've got a dog in our hospital right now getting treated for parvovirus. It's highly contagious. It's something it's long lived in the environment, and the most effective means of protecting against it is vaccination. But that's just one example of things that can cause a problem. So making sure all of your current dogs stay up to date on their vaccines is really, really helpful in preventing them from getting something that can be brought in by another dog. But also making sure that the dog that's coming into your house is up to date on vaccines is important. And, I talked in another podcast about vaccines and doing them at home and the advantages of doing it and saving money. But, the disadvantage gets to come in when you're buying a dog from somebody and, maybe it's not from a buddy, maybe it's one you found online or on a forum or something, and you're bringing them in and, he asks if it's been vaccinated. Oh, yeah, I do my own vaccines. But you got to decide how much you trust this guy and how much you trust the vaccines that you put in them, because you're risking your own dog's health at that point. So that might be a point where you consider, before you buy this dog, do I trust this vaccines, or would I like to have them boosted by a vet before I bring it in? So that should be a consideration. And it's also, vaccine timing is important too. Just sticking your dog with a needle does not mean they're vaccinated that day that you stick that vaccine in there. The vaccine works by exposing your dog to a piece of material that the dog's immune system then builds an immune response to, and that takes several weeks to build up. So, your dog is not protected until it's been several weeks. And in the case of your new puppy that's coming in, he's susceptible to parvovirus even after he's had his first parvovirus shot, because he has this problem called maternal antibody interference. And basically, the antibodies, the immune cells that he gets from his mama's milk, interfere with his ability to respond to his vaccine. And so that's why we have to give puppies a continual parvovirus booster every 3 or 4 weeks till they get old enough for mama's immunity to wear off. But making sure the vaccines are up to date on your dogs and on the dogs coming in would be a great place to start. Past that, having them checked out by a vet before you bring them in. Technically, if a dog is coming across state lines, if you're buying a dog from out of state, they're supposed to be accompanied by a health certificate that says that a dog has examined them and says that they're free of contagious diseases that are, picked up on by an exam. And having a vet check done before you bring a dog in is a great idea, even if it's not for a health certificate for coming across state lines, even if it's just an in-state dog, and having them make sure there's no signs that they're picking up on is a great thing to do before they come into your kennel. And then once they're there, the biggest things are quarantine, but also you got to be smart about how you do that. Okay, because like you did, you put your dog on the other end of your ferret house and thought that was good enough, and for a lot of it probably was. But you get into these other nerdy words like vectors and fomites. All right, so vectors are things that can carry the disease, even off of your dog. So something like a mosquito or a biting fly, a flea, those things can hop on your dog. They bite, they get the disease, they hop over to the other side of the house to your dog, bite, and spread something. So that there's some diseases that are spread that way. Then there's also diseases that are spread by what we call fomites. A fomite is just a physical object that can have whatever disease that it might be on that object. So let's say for parvovirus, if you go and you scoop poop out of the new dog's run with the same poop scooper that you then go in and you set on the floor of your new kennel and you scoop the poop into that one, and that new dog's got parvovirus, well, guess what? That parvovirus is now on that kennel scoop that's now in the new kennel, and you've just spread the virus on a fomite that way. And so an important part of quarantining is not just physical separation from the rest of your kennel, but it's also separating things and yourself from being a fomite between the new dog and the current dogs. So the best ways to go about making sure you don't spread things back and forth would be to make sure you have a dedicated set of food, water bowls, all of those things for that new dog that don't get shared between your current dogs. And then the easiest way to do it is to take care of your current dogs during your kennel cleanup time before you go and take care of the new dog. And that way, anything that is going to spread from the new dog to your current dogs is not going to be on your clothes, on your boots, when you walk from him to them. Instead, just do it backwards and go from your current dogs to the new dog. And if it's not possible, then the best ways to go about it is to try to have the ability to clean off your boots or your shoes, and you can make some boot washes and things like that to be able to do so. But trying to limit the spread of not just the dog to dog contact, but the spread of things between them is important. And the length of quarantine, it depends on who you ask as to how long you should quarantine something. Ideally, it would be probably at least a month. Sometimes it's not always practical. And so at least a few weeks is better than no quarantine. And being diligent about how you're spreading things back and forth will really help. And really what that quarantine is trying to do is allow time for that new dog to show that he's having a problem. So if he gets there and a few days later starts having diarrhea or vomiting or acting sick, you've allowed that the sickness to express itself before you've allowed him to have direct contact with your other dogs. So that's all biosecurity, quarantine, and how that goes into play. And for your new puppy, the biggest things are making sure it's coming with a vaccine, making sure that your dogs are up to date on their vaccines, and then trying to limit spread in contact between him and other unknown dogs. For your new puppy coming in, the good thing is that he's probably not carrying a whole bunch of diseases because he hasn't been exposed to a whole bunch of diseases. So it's more for his protection when you're bringing him in. And while I'm mentioning puppy, the other thing about quarantine and biosecurity is that the fresh puppies like you had, they're the most susceptible to just about everything. And there's some diseases, one in particular, canine herpes virus, that is really, really highly contagious. And it really highly affects puppies in those first few weeks of life. And how that gets brought in is just like you described, a new dog coming in, or even you can have dogs that carry it and they get stressed or they get sick and they start having the herpes virus shed again, even a dog in your current kennel. So that's just one example, though. The important thing is, if you've got puppies on the ground, I would just try not to have any new dogs in at all. For at least probably a month before and a month after those puppies are on the ground, and ideally till those puppies go to their new homes. You would not be bringing any new dogs in or out, just because that will really help just limit the spread of things we can't vaccinate for, can't test for very readily, and keep those most vulnerable part of the population, just keeps them from getting exposed whatsoever. And that would be really helpful in preventing a lot of things.
Yeah, and like I said, I never, I don't know, it never even crossed my mind. And then it was actually the guy that owned the stud. Me and him was talking, and that's how it kind of come about. And then I heard you on Ben's podcast, and I thought I'm gonna message him and just see what he thought. And like I said, they were never together, but now you went over some things there about maybe me brushing up next to him, feeding him or in there changing his water out, him brushing up next to me, and then me going down and taking care of the puppies, and the puppies are jumping on my legs, and so they're touching that same area that that he was also brushing up against, as well. It could have been I guess, a carrier, I guess, between the two.
Absolutely. Yep. And it's always hard to say too. And I think I messaged you about this. It's easy to blame the new dog, and without fully testing and getting those puppies, examined after death, getting an autopsy, it's not possible to say with 100% certainty that was the cause. But it's highly likely and suspicious. But the situations where you're trying to find some reason for it, you can go and get a dog tested or necropsied and have it examined after death and see if they can detect a cause and see if you can prove what that cause is. But all those things being said, yeah, it's sure suspicious of the new dog coming in, isn't it? and those things we talked about will help limit that spread for sure.
Yeah, and it could have been coincidence, but
yeah,
because he's still here. I'm hunting him. He seems perfectly healthy, so it could have just been coincidence. But so we get a new dog in. Other than vaccines and stuff, is for a lack of knowing anything better, is there a Lysol type product that we could treat these dogs? Maybe the dog was healthy at the owner's house, and maybe he got something in the dog hauler truck, or picked it up somewhere along the way, some kind of way. Is there any preventative or any other measures we can take when we pull that dog off that dog hauler truck or out of the bed of a buddy's truck, like a disinfectant type stuff?
Nothing per se that I can think of as far as like a disinfectant, but a bath is never a bad idea, because a lot of these things that get spread in between dogs, it'd either be in respiratory secretions, and what I'm thinking about that, like snot, or stuff they cough up, or then in like fecal matter. And so giving your dog a bath and helping wash as much of that off as you can would be a good place to start. And then your disinfectants really come into play when you're talking about your clothes, your kennels, your feed and water and equipment, things like that. And there's a bunch of them out there. Kennel saw we actually use, you mentioned it, we use that in our hospital for spraying down cages and floors and tables and stuff. But that's a good one. But even old bleach can do a lot. But as far as disinfecting the dog itself, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do other than just trying to get the dirt and grime off of them and hopefully help wash away some diseases with it.
Yeah. In the kennel saw, I ordered it, and of course my wife said, "My goodness, that's a lot for a gallon of something to disinfect a kennel." And I thought, well, if there's a disease up there and this will kill it, and it kills, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to try to even go through what all it says it will kill or sanitize. But I thought, man, I'm going to use a lot of this because I have a fairly large kennel. But honestly, a little bit goes a long way when you mix it, and I mixed it on the stronger, just like the label said, but on the stronger end of what it said, because it gives you two ways to mix it. To treat I treated my walls, I've treated the wire, I treated the floors, and my kennel smelt the best that it's ever smelt. That's for sure.
And an important thing about disinfectants, I'm glad you mentioned this with biosecurity, is most of them do not work good in what we call organic materials. So dirt, poop, hair, stuff like that. There's cleaning, and then there's disinfecting, and you got to clean before you disinfect and get rid of as much of that organic material as you can, because you can spray bleach on your dirt, but it doesn't work well in that dirt. It gets deactivated. So cleaning and getting as much junk out of there as you can with just good old soap and water of some sort, and then allows the disinfectant to get where it needs to. But like you said, and you mentioned a couple of important things, follow the label directions, because if you're not making it strong enough, it's not going to do what it needs to do. And then the other part is you got to leave it on there long enough, because most of these viruses and things, they have to be exposed to that disinfectant for a certain amount of time in order to be killed. And if you just go in there and you spray your disinfectant and you immediately rinse it off, you're not doing enough to actually kill what's out there. So follow your label directions, do what it tells you to do to kill whatever it is you're trying to kill off. And there's multiple things. And like you said, Kennel Sol is probably not the cheapest or most practical for somebody who's not doing this all the time. But there's accelerated hydrogen peroxide. There's this Kennel Sol. Bleach can do a lot, but a lot of these can also damage certain types of flooring or metal, depending on what your kennel is made of. So just do your research, read your label, and choose one that's appropriate for you and your situation and your wallet. But the disinfectants, make sure you clean before you disinfect.
Yeah, I failed to mention that I went through and I pulled dog houses out, water buckets out, feed buckets out, because this is the first time I've used a disinfectant like this, and I have a power washer. I power washed everything, walls, ceilings, floors, and got everything clean. And I believe, if I remember right, I think it was 8 ounces to a gallon of water, and I had a little pump-up sprayer that I mixed it in, and I sprayed my walls, I sprayed dog houses, I sprayed the floors, the wire, and it said just let it sit and dry for 10 minutes and leave it. And so that's what I did. Like I said, I don't know that it killed anything, but it sure made everything smell clean and look, it really looked clean afterwards.
Yeah, no, you did exactly right. Clean it and then let it sit and disinfect. I'm sure you killed a whole lot, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, those, I mean, we could go on for hours, and we've been on here almost an hour. It seems hard to believe, but there's so many topics out there that we could go on forever, and I'd love to have you back in the future. Maybe we can go over some other topics, but was there anything else that you could think of that we needed to cover in those areas before we get to shutting this down here?
I'd say, and I've encouraged this in pretty much all of my articles and encouraged it on my podcast I did and on my social media. The best thing to do is to get established with the vet before you run into your problem, whether that's tick-borne disease, whether that's a wound in the field, a biosecurity issue, because having a relationship with your vet, and that doesn't mean bringing your dog in once 2 years ago for a cut on its leg. That's not a relationship. Having a current annual exam that has a valid veterinary client-patient relationship attached to it, and being able to call in to your vet and ask about this whatever situation that's going on, and hopefully have priority to come in and have a problem taken care of. That's probably the most important thing you can do for any of these areas we're talking about, because it's just impossible to cover everything you could need to know on any of these areas in an hour-long podcast episode. And being able to talk with your vet about specific questions and issues in your situation is super important and helpful. So that's the overarching message for pretty much anything I talk about is make sure that you rely on your local vet.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because like my vet, Zach Phillips, is my vet. He's a large animal vet, and like I said, he reached out to me on that Saturday morning to check on the puppies to see how they were before he went out of town to do work, and I'm so thankful to have a relationship like that with my vet, because he is one that if I had a dog fall out of a tree or get cut real bad on a barbed wire fence or something in the middle of the night, that I could shoot him a text and meet him somewhere, or take him to his house, and he's always ready to jump in and help, and that's very, very important, and I do agree with you there. You need to have some sort of relationship with a vet around you, and just find a good one, and preferably for me one like I have. He used to hunt with hounds, so he kind of has a little bit of understanding, and he has cattle dogs that he works his cows with, so he has quite a few dogs, so he's pretty understanding when it comes to those type of things.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Well, we're at like 50 minutes or so, right at an hour. Do you have a hunting story of any kind, whether it be with your tree dog or deer hunting or anything that you could share with us before we close this out?
Hmm.
Yeah, I put you on the spot.
Well,
I forgot to tell you that.
that's all right. I get put on the spot all day long, every day. Oh, clients catch me flat-footed all the time. Oh, I guess I could tell you probably something about my first cur dog, Belle. She was a Ladner cur, like I mentioned earlier, and I don't know if it's just my luck in having these dogs, or if this is a trend in the breed. I've only had two, so I can't really say, but she was a little bit of a slow starter too, and her first squirrel season was very similar to Rip's, and we hunted in the woods, and I was 15 starting her off, and we hunted and hunted and hunted and walked and walked and walked, and I would get in the woods and I'd see squirrels running overhead, and I'd try to hold her head to where she'd look up there in the tree and watch that thing running around, and she had no idea what she was out there doing. She was having fun, but had no idea what she was out there doing. And I'd get so frustrated, and we got in the woods so many times where she had so many opportunities, and our squirrel season at the time would run from the beginning of September and in January 31st, or whatever the last Saturday was there. And we hunted probably 4 or 5 days a week, with me being in high school, for that entire season. Never treat a squirrel. Well, doggone it, if February 1st, I leave my gun back home like a good boy, because this season's closed, if we don't walk out there in the woods. And guess what she did, Jason?
She treated that
daggone first squirrel she ever did. And now I don't know if I've ever felt a mix of rage and excitement like I'd felt right then. She drove me crazy, but that doggone it, that is what I think of every time I think of many things about patience, but especially with this current dog. Is all it takes is maybe just one more day in the woods, and sometimes all it takes with some of these cases I work on is just a little bit more, or just one more question, or just one different medication we need to try. And she taught me a lot, and I didn't even know it when I was a kid. But that last day, after it was closing season, daggone it, I love that dog. But that day, she about didn't survive. So that's the story that sticks out to me from Belle.
Yeah, that's a great story, and I think we've all felt that frustration. I got a buddy of mine, Brett Stevens, who's got a couple of young dogs, and he's got one he's about ready to give up on, and I think she gave him a little glimmer of hope over the weekend when he was hunting. So I know we can all relate to that frustration, and just need to learn to be patient with them. Sometimes it takes a few a little bit longer than others.
That's exactly right.
So, Doc, if you don't have anything else, I think we'll shut it down here. And if someone was interested in if they lived out in Virginia in your area, how would they get a hold of you if they wanted to have you look after their dogs?
Sure. Yeah, you can reach out to me on social media, like you said. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Tree Dog Doc, and our clinic name is Riverside Veterinary Hospital. And I'm an associate there, and myself and my boss, Dr. Ryan, she's an awesome vet as well, and she is very practically minded and we see a lot of bear dogs and coon dogs, especially in our area. But Riverside Veterinary Hospital is our name. We're in Good, Virginia, which is in Bedford County. And if you're listening to this and you're close enough of a drive, we'd love to have you.
Well, there you go. I know we have some people in Virginia that listen to this. One of my sponsors that sponsors this podcast, Nathan Kaufman with CZ Welding and Custom Doll Boxes, it lives in Virginia. So if you guys are in Virginia or close enough, you can get over and see Dr. Young. By all means, go support this guy. He took his time out today to be on here and share this information with us, and I'm appreciative of it, as I'm sure other people will be as too. So if you don't have anything else to add, Doc, I think we'll shut her down here. Maybe we can get together in the future and do this again.
That sounds like a good plan. Thank you, Jason, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
Thanks, guys, for listening to the Coonhound Collective podcast today. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to listen to the podcast. If you don't mind, head over to Facebook and give us a like, and head over to Instagram and give us a follow. It's both at the Coonhound Collective. Also, if you would like to reach us here at the Coonhound Collective, you can reach us at thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. If there's someone that you would like to hear on the podcast or a product that you would like to hear talked about, please send it to thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. Thanks again. Have a great day.